Hey there, welcome back to the Breakthrough Creative. I'm your host, John McDavitt, and this is a place where we talk about the business of art and the art of business. We are still in the middle of our Halloween series where we are interviewing special effects makeup artists and people who have made a big impact in the film industry. A couple weeks ago, spoke with my friend Carlos Huante, who is an extraordinary creature designer. Last week was Ted Haynes, who is an incredible foam fabber. He's a foam fabricator making costumes and understructures and fat suits and muscle suits, and worked on the Avengers movies, Marvel movies, Mandalorian, really cool stuff. So you can check out those two episodes. But this week, we're going to be speaking with somebody who is primarily a special effects makeup artist, a guy who is on set doing makeups, has been doing this for decades, had his own shop for a while, ran a big show for Rick Baker in Gremlins 2, and then moved into pretty much pure on-set makeup application for shows like Star Trek, the new Star Trek series in the 90s and beyond. And he works now on the Orville. He's worked on Marvel movies. And the chances are you might not know Bart Mixon, but you've seen his work. And really cool guy, really cool story. And we're going to track in with him in just a second. And, you know, a really big part of his story is that he designed and created and then applied the makeup on Tim Curry in the 1990s miniseries of Stephen King's It as Pennywise the Clown. And there is a documentary that's going to be coming out on the making of that miniseries. So I encourage you to keep your eyes out for it. Bart is going to talk about that just a little bit later on in the show. And it's just really cool stuff. So with that being said, before I hand it over to Bart, I'm going to ask you, would you take a moment and would you subscribe to the Breakthrough Creative? That's going to help to grow awareness for the show. YouTube will start to share it more and more. And my goal is really to have artists who are hoping to make a living from the art that they do be encouraged and informed that it is something that they can do. It's something that you got to work hard at and you've got to go after it. But I really think that this show is going to be beneficial for anybody who wants to make a living from their art. And so if you do that, I'd really appreciate it. And with that being said, I'm now going to switch over to my interview with Bart Mixon. Hey, welcome to the show, Bart Mixon.
Thank you for having me. Nice to be here. I'm glad to hear you're a fan. I always like to meet another fan.
Yeah. I was telling Bart before we started to record that I have been seeing his work in the pages of Fangoria from the early days, back when you were working with Mark Shostrom. And
Oh, yeah.
was Fright Night 2 actually your gig?
Yeah, that was, I'm from Houston, Texas. I lived in Houston, but still came out to LA to work on, like I came out in 1981 to do Forbidden World for a week. I met Mark Shostrom there and we kept in touch. So then I did shows with Mark, like Raw Courage. We did that in New Mexico. And then Mark brought me out for Elm Street 2 and the Supernaturals in 84 and 85. And then after working on Robocop in 86, then I moved to LA in 87. So that's kind of the brief how I got here. But my brother had worked for Fantasy 2 Film Effects. He had moved out about 5 years before me, my twin brother, Brett. And when I was out working for Mark, probably in 84, we were going to the Supernaturals for some reason. We had another show, Neon Maniacs, that we were going to do. For some reason, that went away. Supernaturals was a couple of weeks from starting. So I went over to Fantasy 2 and helped my brother, and he was working for Ernie Farino there doing the laser beam animation for the first Terminator. So through that, I met Gene Warren, who owned Fantasy 2, and they primarily did high-speed miniatures and optical effects, animation, rotoscoping, that sort of thing. But he was interested in adding makeup effects, kind of like Boss Films had Steve Johnson doing, their creature stuff. And so he was interested in, being able to offer makeup effects as well. So Fright Night 2 became the first show that we did that. And then when he got that script, then he brought me in, and I headed up the makeup team there at Fantasy 2, and we did everything but the werewolf and the guy with the bugs that when he gets cut open. Greg Canham did those. And I do remember, I think I suggested Greg. I think it was between Greg and a couple other guys, but Greg had just done the werewolf TV show. So I was like, well, it makes sense that he does the werewolf because, he can do that in his sleep. And all that hair kind of intimidated me anyway at that point because I hadn't done a lot of hair work. So there were two crews. Greg headed up, the werewolf and the bug guy, and then everything else was under my umbrella, for Fantasy 2 and G More.
So if you're listening to this, we are talking about shows right now in the 80s. So this is the early history of Bart's career. So let's go back to before you started your career. How did you become interested in art, and how did that turn into effects work?
Well, I'm a lifetime comic book fan, which you can probably tell from this is pretty much comic book related stuff and some, makeup. But I think I was either 4 or 5 when I got my first comic book, Spider-Man #6. And I became an instant Marvel comic fan, and specifically Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby. So I was just big fans of their artwork. When I was also about 5 years old, I saw the original King Kong. There was a second run theater like 2 blocks from my house, and I have a twin brother, and my mom would used to take us down there in our pajamas and I guess try and get us sleepy by watching a movie. So King Kong and I think Curse of the Werewolf were some of the first movies I remember seeing, and I just fell in love with King Kong. I still think it's the greatest movie ever made, and so I think those two things kind of set me on my life's path, so I did, I think from the comic books, I tried drawing my own. So I think I developed an interest in art. From King Kong, I think that made me a movie fan. So then I discovered like 7 Faces of Dr. Lowe and the 68 Planet of the Apes. So that, made me a makeup fan. So at some point when I was a kid, I didn't know what I wanted, if I wanted to be a comic book artist, be a makeup artist, or a stop motion animator. And I couldn't draw well enough to be a comic book artist. I didn't have the patience or the setup to machine armatures and do the stop motion. I don't want to say makeup was the easy choice because it's certainly not, but it was something that I guess I just discovered I had an aptitude for when I started doing, my own, I think I was 12 when I started doing my own experiments, usually on my brother, some crude, slip latex prosthetics and things like that. I was in Houston. There was I discovered a comic book club, which is no longer there, but they used to sponsor like the local comic book conventions and that kind of stuff. And again, this is the early 70s. And there were members of the club that were also makeup fans or stop motion fans. So they would tell us, we'd exchange ideas. Or I had this one friend, Ken Donnell, he had some very crude makeup techniques, but he knew the very basics, like how to make a live cast, although he did it with plaster on your face, which you shouldn't do. But, and he told me where to get latex, I think, and stuff like that. So I was able to just, again, at 12, I was sculpting my own Planet of the Apes type masks. I think there was the Houston Con 71 had a costume contest that I, made my brother up as Cornelius from Planet of the Apes. Unfortunately, I don't have a photo. I'm sure it looks horrible, so I'm probably glad I don't. But and then I started doing my own Super 8. My brother and I did our own, movies, and we did at least by the time we got out of high school, I think we'd done at least 3. Amateur films that had, makeup effects and stop motion and, split screens and whatever we could do. So slowly we just had a fan interest in it. And then also at these conventions, I met Jim Danforth, the animator, and in 1976, I met Rick Baker in 77, which that proved to be, very pivotal. I don't know that I knew it then, but I stayed in touch with Rick and would correspond with him, and he would tell me how to do stuff, or suggest, like I'd send him a drawing. Oh, I want to do this as a makeup, and he's like, well, I'd break it down this way, or why don't you just do it as a mask, and and you wanted, well, anyway, he would just tell me stuff. This was back when he was approachable, and he gave me his home address and his phone number, and things like that, which he's too since then he's become too much of a superstar to dare do that. But so just slowly as a hobby, I was pretty much self-taught. I mean, I did take some sculpting lessons briefly from a friend from this comic book club. I took art in high school, but in terms of the things that were beneficial to me in terms of sculpting and mold making, I probably knew more than my art teacher. And then I remember I took a stage makeup class in college, like a night class, just to kind of try and refine my makeup skills. And this would have all been, I graduated high school in 77. So this would have been, or 76 rather, 77 was probably when I did that makeup college class. And then just practicing. And as we went into college, my brother and I still were trying to do 16 millimeter amateur films. So, that, and usually they'd have some kind of makeup effects in them. Did an old age makeup for one thing that we never finished. I did a guy cutting his wrist, for another that my brother did, complete. So just basically started as a fan.
Like the picture that you've painted for me is a young guy and his brother, because you guys, being twins, it sounds like you're very close.
We are coming over for lunch later today.
That's awesome. And then it sounds like you're both creative, and you both supported each other and played off of each other's interests and skills and development. Right. And it sounds like your brother is more of the 2D guy.
Well, back then
he was a rotoscope guy and all that, right?
Yeah. When we were kids, he was more the writer and I was more the artist. So I was more visual and he was more, the word guy. But when he moved to California in 82, I think with the intention or hopes of becoming an editor. I don't know that he really had a specific career path, but he was interested in editing because he had taken some college, filmmaking classes. A friend of ours, Ernie Farino, who lived in Dallas when we met him in the 70s, he had moved out and was working for Roger Corman's New World in the early 80s. And he was doing rotoscope and animation effects. Again, like he did the titles and the lasers for the first Terminator film. So somehow he and Brett hooked up. I think Ernie just needed some help, and he knew he could show Brett what he needed, to be done. So Brett worked for him on something, I don't remember what, Phantom Empire, some, low budget, TNA action movie. And then suddenly 20 years later, Brett's, he had like about a 20-year career doing that. And he pretty much exclusively worked for Fantasy 2, which is where Ernie sublet space from. Brett did work on a couple of other, shows outside of Fantasy 2, but he became, for whatever reason, a visual effects guy, like you said, like 2D animation and that sort of thing. And then I was always sculpting and doing that aspect of our amateur films. So I just gravitated towards the makeup effects, and that sort of thing.
And so it sounds like it was always more than a hobby for the two of you.
Well, it certainly started as a hobby. I don't have a lot of interests. I'm pretty focused. It's like, I like Jack Kirby comic books, I like makeup effects. I don't know realistically how much of a prayer I thought I had back in 1976 of being from Texas, being able to do this professionally. Guys like Tom Savini hadn't really come on the scene yet, or just barely were, in places like Pittsburgh. It just seemed like you had to be in LA. And the prospects of moving to California in the late 70s was pretty daunting. So I didn't have like a game plan, like, I'm going to do this, this, and this and become a makeup artist. But I did pursue it as a hobby. And while I was living in Texas, I was like reading Famous Monsters and I'd check out like Variety or Hollywood Reporter, and I was looking for like non-Hollywood based films that might need makeup effects. In Famous Monsters, I read about Fred Olin Ray, who at the time lived in Florida. And so I contacted him. I mean, back then you could just call information, hey, do you have a number for whoever? And 9 times out of 10, they did. So I started contacting like local filmmakers, both in the Houston area and then any place but in LA, and seeing if they needed anything. And I had done a animation test reel. I took an animation class at Rice University in Houston, and I'd done a test reel of some outer space effects. And when I contacted Fred, he had just done a film called The Alien Dead, and he needed, it's about a meteor that, crashes in the Florida swamps and turns people into zombies. And this test footage I'd shot had like this blue kind of orb flying through space, like heading towards Earth or some planet. So Fred was, well, instead of hiring you to film stuff for me, why don't I just buy this footage from you? So my first credit was as an animation effects guy in 1980 on The Alien Dead for Fred. But then I would also, he did this show called The Halloween Planet, and I made a dragon hand puppet for that. Or there was some show called Curse of the Screaming Dead, which I shouldn't even mention these names because I don't want people looking these up. But they needed, it was like a zombie Confederate soldier zombie movie. A couple of years before the one, Mark Shostrom and I did The Supernaturals, which was Civil War zombies, but this was 3 or 4 years before that. And through meeting and talking with Rick Baker, he had shown me this technique that he had done, and I'm sure other makeup artists had done too, where he took he had an alien mask, and through cotton and latex and various other techniques, he'd made 3 different masks. I mean, they were all like the same species, but they were 3 distinctive, masks. So when these guys needed these zombie masks and they had like, $200 or something, I had like a stock zombie head that I'd sculpted, and then I took all my stock appliances and glued on it and made 6 different masks out of, this one basic mask. And again, like I said, I probably got, $200 if I was lucky, so I would do this basically mail order makeup effects stuff where I would build the stuff in Houston and then just ship it off to wherever, because they certainly couldn't afford to travel me there. And again, I was getting $50, $100, maybe $200, but at least I was slowly building a resume of, so when I met people like Mark Shostrom, I did have something I could show him. And which I guess before I forget, I guess that's how I got, I'd corresponded with Ernie Farino when he lived in Dallas, and we knew him from the conventions. And when he moved to New World, I guess I was just sending him photos of like sculptures and things that I had done. And apparently he had shown some of that to John Beekler, who was running their makeup effects, department. And at some point on Forbidden World, which this would be 1981, I got a call. I don't know if it's from Ernie or from Beekler, but they needed some assistance. And I'm sure it was just because Ernie had this packet of my work that I'd just been corresponding with him more on a friendly basis. Not like I wasn't sending the stuff to Ernie to try and get work from him, but it was just like, hey, here's a mask I sculpted, or here's some, hand prosthetics I'm working on. And it was good enough for them to offer me a job for a week on Forbidden World, providing I could get myself out there and put myself up. So I was getting $50 a day to work on Forbidden World, but I haven't added up how much it cost, but I'm sure it cost me 2 or 3 times that to do it. By the time the plane ticket, I had a friend who was going to college in LA, so I was able to stay with him, but I had to rent a car. So, I mean, I clearly lost money on that deal, but the contacts and the experience that I made were invaluable and paid off in the long run. And again, that's where I met Mark Shostrom, and we corresponded and kept in touch. And eventually I did, 3 shows with him. So it's a lot of it for me, it's kind of been like who just in terms of, and I didn't seek people out. Like I wasn't kissing their ass. Like, oh, this guy can get me work, so I'm gonna like him. I was legitimately a Rick Baker fan from 1970, long before I thought I would ever have a prayer of meeting him, much less working for him. And it was just I loved the man's work. Or like Ernie was a friend from, the conventions, and he lived in Texas, and we had mutual interests. And, this stuff grew out of that. It wasn't, like I wasn't plotting. I didn't have like a flow chart, like, oh, I got to meet Rick Baker in 1977 so I can ask him for a job, and, whatever, but I would stay in touch and communicate with these guys. And so, it gets to, and it's even like that now, like when I'm working on shows, I pretty much I'm working for my friends. And, when you have a position to fill on a show, and, and you've got to bring somebody in to do it, then you're going to like, well, who do I get? Do I get this guy that I know, or do I take a chance on this guy that I don't? Or do I get this guy that I know, who I know works, plays well with others, or he's not going to be a problem? Or do I bring in this guy who's a good artist, but he's a handful, or he causes trouble? And, so anyway, so a lot of this stuff is, and I'm sure it's in any type of business, you tend to, hire your friends, or at least people whose work you're familiar with and comfortable with. So I think it's more of a comfort level than but that comes also in part from a friendship. A lot of my generation, we were self-taught, and like I would correspond with Rick, and he would say like, well, you want to do it this way, or this is what you want to, this is how you do it, or this is the materials that you need to do it with. But a lot of times I couldn't afford those materials, or I couldn't find them. So I would have to come up with my own variation of that technique. It's like I knew where I wanted to get, but I can't do it this way. So I got to go about it another way. So a lot of us, we had to think on our feet, we had to improvise. And there were things I used to do just out of necessity in Texas, that when I moved here, like working for Mark, I would like, well, I used to do this and it worked, so why don't we try that? And he's like, that's a great idea. And I think back then there weren't the makeup schools, there weren't the tutorial videos and all that crap. There were a couple of books, and just you had to figure it out. Now you got a lot of people that go to these schools, and nothing against the schools. I think they do learn a wealth of information, but I don't know that they necessarily learn to think on their feet. They just, they learn how to do it the way they were taught. Some of them don't even know why you do it that way. It's just like, well, this is the way they showed me. And when they're thrown up or hit with a situation that's a little different than what they were taught, they're like, oh, I don't know what to do, and it's, and I think a lot of that does come from experience. But I think a lot of the experience that we got from doing it ourselves and making our own mistakes, like in our garages and whatnot, as kids, a lot of these guys don't have that chance to do. I remember Rick telling me he sculpted something once, and I think it had an undercut, under the nostrils, and the mold locked, and he couldn't get the mold apart. And he goes, I never did that again, and I mean, he was probably 13, when that happened. But it's, you learn from those kind of mistakes. And, if you don't have a chance to, I don't know. I mean, I work with a lot of young people that are great. So I'm not saying like, oh, kids these days, but it's just, I don't know. It's just, it's a whole different kind of generation, a whole different attitude, and it's just different. But I think it was very beneficial being able to learn, being able to learn from my mistakes and to make mistakes, and the whole trial and error part of it, certainly I think helped make a lot of us the artists that we are today.
Well, and you're kind of, when you're learning on your own, and I mean, I think in some sense, even if we're in class, we're learning on our own, right? Because we've got to put the information in and go do it. And sometimes we think, maybe when we're younger, or maybe when we haven't had the same kind of experiences, we think, well, this is the way to do it. Just like you said, there's one way to do this. Well, there's not. There's so many ways to do something.
Oh, yeah.
And you really find that out when you're on the edge of a knife, right? Like when the clock is ticking and there's money burning and you've got to figure it out. So you must enjoy that aspect of the work.
Well, I used to. Now I like the predictable. Yeah, I mean, there's still, I was on a show, used to, we did everything with foam latex. And about 10 years ago, I was on, I think it was that show House, the medical show.
Yeah.
and people were just starting to use silicone for prosthetics, and we got these prosthetics from a shop, and they'd used a PVA, which is polyvinyl alcohol, and it's got like a green color to it. And they'd use that as a mold release to, because when you do a silicone prosthetic, you've got the negative mold, and you spray bald cap plastic into it, and then you put the silicone behind that. But the plastic wants to stick, so you'd have to be sure and release it properly. And I don't do a lot of lab work anymore, so I don't really know necessarily the correct way to do something. But in this case, I was able to recognize, like, we couldn't get the green tint off the prosthetic. Ooh. Because the solvent in the encapsulant had reactivated the PVA and had bonded it into, one thing. And the department head I was working with, she's like calling experts that she knew, like on the East Coast, who was a great guy. And I was gratified that he came to the same conclusion that I did, but I'm sitting there going like, well, this looks like PVA. It must have reactivated, blah, blah, blah. And then she's, 30 minutes later, after being on the phone with this guy, she says, well, he says it must have reactivated the PVA. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds good to me, So, I mean, even though I'd never done it, I was able to, I knew enough about the chemical properties of the things that we were using to be able to figure it out. And I don't really remember where I was going with that, but other than, I guess, just to say that just because, like, again, I haven't really done lab work since the early 2000s.
I think we were talking about the being on the edge of the knife, right? And you got to figure it out on the moment.
Yeah. Well, with that, I was like, this, at least I was able to figure out what caused that. Anyway, I was on Avengers Endgame. We were doing, what's James Gunn's brother, Sean, the Kraken or whatever, the bald guy who at the end of Guardians 2, he got Yondu's fin, so he was bald and he had the little Yondu thing on his head. But we were doing a pickup shot or something with him, and he had to have a bald cap, and so the bald caps are plastic, and they're acetone sensitive. You melt the edges with acetone. But then we were putting a silicone prosthetic on top of that, which is also acetone sensitive. So I was worried that we might melt through the cap when we blend the one onto the other. And typically you would take Pax paint, which was a Dick Smith invention, which is acrylic paint, and Prosthetic adhesive, which is an acrylic glue. And we would seal the bald cap with that. But I wasn't confident that was going to be enough protection. So we also have a Duo, which is an eyelash adhesive, which is a latex. So I did a combo of the Prosthetic, which is the base of the Pax paint, and the Duo, and I made a mixture of that and stippled it over the cap because I knew the acetone would not attack it couldn't penetrate the latex. So, and again, just through experience, I was able to figure that out, without, I could just logically, well, this is going to happen. I want this to prevent it, so I can do that. Whereas I knew some friends were in a similar situation. I think it was on some Thor reshoots where they had to rebuild the prosthetic. They were like, oh, the acetone is going to attack the bald cap, so you need to make it out of something else. And so then they had to spend the time and the money to re-engineer these appliances, where had they just stippled a coat of, Duo and Prosthetic on the bald cap, it would have saved them that trouble. So again, just being, having been around the stuff as long as I have, I may not specifically make the thing or whatever anymore, but at least I know enough about the mechanics and the workings of it to sometimes offer useful suggestions. So even though I'm turning 62 soon, I can still, I can still offer some help. So,
well, happy early birthday! It sounds like some really important aspects of what you just shared are, one, you've got the experience under your belt, right? Like you've gone at it for years, so you've gone at the wall so many times. You can see a fresh wall and kind of figure out where the foothold is and where to grab something, how to climb that wall real quick, right? Of the makeup,
right?
And then you also are good on the spot as far as kind of knowing how to go over that wall to take a look at a makeup and say, boy, here's this. these could be issues. So you see the problems before they happen, and then you're able to adjust on the fly, and you're able to do it with an efficiency that helps with time, and it helps with savings. So I mean, man, you put those quivers, those arrows in your quiver, and it's no wonder that people want to work with you.
Well, thank you. You try to be conscientious, of all those things, like you're saying, the time but a lot of times too, something's just dumped in your lap, and you're like, how do I make this work? And sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And that's another reason why I like kind of the circle of friends that I end up working with that have their own shops. I know if I'm going out on a show for Vincent Van Dyke, that I'm not going to get a pile of crap. I'm going to get nice pieces, and that's not always the case. Like I did a lot of day checking on some of the Star Trek TV shows in the like Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and there's some really nice work on the show, but sometimes you would get some pieces that had some pretty thick edges, and you would have to, you'd have to work with it, and you'd have to kind of pull some things out of your hat, to make it work. And there were a group of us who generally had a lab background, who were good at thinking on our feet. So we had what we called the Westmore aliens, where Michael Westmore, the department head, he had a kind of a stock room with a lot of heads and faces and whatnot. And certain groups of us, he would just say, okay, you're just doing a Westmore alien today, so just go in there and pick you some pieces and, and put something together to make it work. But he knew that we were of a background where we could do that, where other people who were fine artists, but they necessarily couldn't think on their feet. I remember I had one piece that it was like a cowl, and these, I think it came like down in here, and these leading edges were just horrible because we used them a lot. They were reused for years sometimes. But so it's like, well, I can glue it on and then spend a lot of time trying to blend this edge off, or I like dug through a stock, and they had like what we call an old age wrap, which is the neck and the cheeks, and it hid all my edges. And I remember another makeup artist was like, well, that's not an alien face, that's an old man face. And I'm like, well, once I paint it green, it's going to be an alien face, So, we'd take like noses and turn them upside down and stick them on people's chins and, stretch them and just, to make cool stuff. And some of the other makeup artists would be like, well, but that's a nose, why are you putting it on their chin? It's like, well, it's going to be a chin now, and I mean, just some were too, and I don't know if it was a lack of confidence on their part, or if they just didn't really understand that Michael wanted us to, to be inventive and creative. But he, I mean, again, there were groups of us that he was comfortable with, just going for it. In fact, another quick Star Trek story. I remember one day I did an alien, and the guy playing him was, I guess, kind of, Hispanic, brown tones. So I put the headpiece on, and then I matched it all to his skin. And it looked nice, but Michael goes, well, he goes, this looks good, but he goes, but it's not really, like fanciful enough. It looks too human in terms of the coloring, even though he had like the big potato head or whatever. So the next day I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to be, get as outrageous as I can. So I took like sky blue and bubblegum pink Pax paints, and I painted the guy with that. And I was thinking he was going to be like, oh, you've gone too far. But he comes by and he goes, that's what I'm talking about, And so, I mean, I was purposely trying to go too broad with it, but he's like, no, it looks great. And I mean, not to say, I mean, I could have screwed it up, but but he liked us to, just to kind of push ourselves and, kind of, see what we could, bring to it creatively. And it was a show where he had a staff of makeup artists, but then we have what we call day checkers, where we just come in for a day or two or, week, whenever to help with the overflow. And so he would bring in, I mean, you had some pretty high profile guys on there sometime. Craig Reardon was on there, frequently, who had, worked on Poltergeist. And, so it was a great place to meet new people or get reacquainted with, old friends. Mark Shostrom was on it for a while.
Now, what would have happened if Westmore had come by and he's like, "Whoa, you went too far"? Like, how would you have adjusted given the time you had?
Well, I would ask how much time I did have, and then I would redo it accordingly. I mean, if he says like, "Oh, that's too much. You've got 20 minutes. See what you can do." Then I would have hurriedly done something. I recently worked on the Orville, that Seth MacFarlane Star Trek parody, which this season hasn't aired yet. The work that I was doing, but similar story. We had a guy, made him up. It came from the shop, pre-painted to a certain degree, in like blue tones. So I just kind of followed that. Because it is a lot of these prosthetic makeups take so long that it's a good idea to pre-paint, either you personally or a lot of times the shop will send it out pre-painted. But so I made the guy up. He sat, he went in, Seth saw him. Hey, looks great. He sat around for 8 hours, and then they got him on set, and then suddenly they didn't like him. Oh, he's blue and this other guy's blue. So repaint, yours. And I'm like, okay, he was good 8 hours ago. Why? So I took him back, and I very quickly, because I didn't have a lot of time, so I made him like an olive green or something, basically whatever I could overspray. It's like, okay, he's blue, so if I spray him with yellow, he's going to become green, And so we take him back in. Oh, that looks great, So, but then they get him on set, and then he goes, oh, he's still too blue. And then you look around the set, and it's lit with blue lights. I mean, I look blue. It's like, well, everything's blue in here. You got blue light on it, but you can't really say that. You're just like, sorry, it looked good out there, So, I mean, sometimes, you do what you can. I mean, sometimes, it is compromise in a lot of situations, especially on shows like that, where you're just kind of coming in doing background, characters and stuff like that. So and I guess you got to pick your battles, you just kind of, you're like, hey, whatever, I'll paint it whatever color you want. It's like, I don't care, it's your show, but you approve the first one, you approve the second one, and then now suddenly you don't like it. It's like, that's not my fault. And again, you can just look around you and see that it's the blue light that's doing it. I mean, we all
is it I mean, that's a common sense response, right? But you gotta kind of read the room.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
Yeah, I was on another, I did the Fantastic Four movies with Michael Chiklis, and I was also doing some Doctor Doom stuff on the first one. We're doing the scene where Doom is just starting to change, starting to get the metallic skin, and he's at the doctor's office. I don't know if you don't remember the movie, that's all right. It's actually, I didn't think it was that bad, but it's certainly not as good.
I do. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I mean, Marvel, as a studio, I think has certainly done better. And when they finally get around to doing a Fantastic Four movie, it's going to be fantastic. But I had this gelatin appliance on Doom's arm, because this was before we'd figured out silicone, and they had shot the whole scene. It starts with him getting his arm X-rayed, and then he puts his clothes on, and he has a conversation with this other doctor, and then he throws the guy around the room. And so by the end of the day, the arm was just beat up. It just looked like hell. It had, fuzz in it from his wardrobe and all this stuff. And so they're setting up to do the hero close-up of the arm. And they're like, all right, next shot's, going to be on the arm. And I just kind of, under my breath, I was like, oh, great, let's shoot it when it looks like shit, And the director heard me, and he goes, oh, wait a minute. He goes, does it look bad? I go, well, yeah, it's gotten beat up from, a couple hours of filming. He goes, well, can you, fix it? And I go, well, not, I can try, but I go, but it's not going to be as good as a fresh, applied piece. And he says, okay, well, then we won't shoot it today. We'll come back and just do this insert, some other time, like on a double's arm. And I was like, thank you, and had I not spoken up, then, I would have just done what I could, and it would have looked, so, I mean, I didn't like stand up and go, hey, you can't shoot this. But I mean, at least I had kind of, muttered, something in the, within earshot. And I've been on when I was working on Robocop, I remember a couple of days when, then I was more of a kid, so I was trying to, I wanted Rob Bottin to, think I was doing a good job. But like they wanted to do a shot of his back. And I'm like, oh, no, you can't film this. I got to wait a minute. I got to go in and fix this. And whatever the problem was, I was having difficulty with. And then unbeknownst to me, they had reframed and just kind of framed it out. There was something in his lower back that was, one of the suits had like a weird buckle. It didn't fit as good as the other one. And, so I was trying to adjust that. And then the DP just, framed up a little higher and framed it out. And they're like, Bart, it's not in the shot. And I go, oh, okay, well, it was in the shot when I looked at the monitor, 5 minutes ago, but good, So, yeah, but yeah, you got to choose your battles, in terms of, when you want to speak up. I mean, when I was doing like something like Pennywise, he's the main character. So yeah, I tried to make sure he looked good in every shot. There were days on the Fantastic Four would be, framing up on Chickless, and I'd go to the first AD, assistant director, and I'm like, what's the shot? And the guy says, it's so wide, it could be a monkey smoking a pipe was his favorite. But basically he's saying that he's little in the frame. And I'm like, okay, well then he looks fine. So, you don't need to run in there and do like a 10-minute touch up on somebody when it's their back and they're that big in the frame, but you do need to be on them you need to be able to tell when it counts, and so that means you got to, watch the monitor and, and that kind of stuff. So you got to be, aware of what they're shooting and how they're shooting it and, that sort of thing.
So doing lab work is one thing. Doing the makeups on set are totally different, because you're dealing with producers, directors, cinematographers, and then the actors. Have you always been good with people, or was that something that you grew into?
Well, I don't know. Some people would say I'm not very good with people. I guess I guess as I developed, got more experience, I think I got better. My people skills got better. There's a maybe somewhat embarrassing video from Robocop where they're like interviewing Peter Weller, and I'm putting him in the suit. So like I'm on my knees down there, like screwing his leg together or something. And they're asking him how long it takes to get in the suit. And he goes, usually it takes, 20 minutes or whatever. He goes, but today it's taken a little longer for some reason. Why is that, Bart? And he like looks down there at me, and I go, well, if you don't quit moving, it's going to take longer, And then like, I didn't even remember saying that. And like, I saw the video years later, and I'm like, oh my God, like I was on camera and I actually, I actually said that. So, I was like, holy crap. So, I guess again, like you said earlier, you got to learn to read the room. But there was another example when I was doing the second Fantastic Four with Chickless, and they're doing the EPK, behind the scenes footage. And so I'm in the chair making him up, and they're filming the two of us, and they're like, the typical, oh, how long does this take? This, must take forever. And Chickless starts saying like, oh, it used to take like 3 or 4 hours, which it never took more than like an hour and 45 minutes, but actors always like at least double whatever time, which maybe it feels like it to them. But so basically we're like almost getting in an argument on camera. I'm like, because I think I said like, no, it's like 2 hours at the most. And he's like, no way. He goes, it used to take like 3 or 4 hours. And then I'm sitting there, he's like turning to the camera going like, it was like 3 or 4 hours. And I'm behind him where he can't see me. And at that point I didn't care, so, but, and then I think later he's like, oh, he goes, whatever. I look like a, he didn't like the way he came off in the interview. I'm sorry. So I mean, that I did on purpose. I was just like, it's like, I don't have to sit here and take this, but it's weird. It's like, after when we did Fright Night 2 with Julie Carmen, who was a lovely woman. I really liked working with her, and we're like, Instagram and Facebook friends now, still. But an interview came out in a magazine about her right after we took our live cast. And for some reason, the first live cast didn't turn out well, and we had to ask her back to do it over. So she didn't really enjoy the process the first time, so she wasn't too anxious to do it the second time, but she did anyway. But then I'm reading in this article where she's talking about, they stick straws up your nose. And I'm like, we didn't do that. So even when you don't do it, they say you did. There's just this
fake news.
Yeah, well, exactly. Or
back in the day.
The mystique about it. And it's like, well, it's this, and this. And yeah, it's like, well, no, that didn't happen. Or I was doing another show with, was it Larry? I think Larry Miller. He was the dean and the Nutty Professor. And we had to do him and the lead actress, their head casts in the same day, but we staggered them. And we did her first. And as she was leaving our shop, he was coming in. So they talked out, you know, in the parking lot. And then he came in and he was saying like, oh, he goes, I was very nervous, you know, or apprehensive about doing this. But then I bumped into so-and-so out in the parking lot and she said, you guys were great. And it was, you know, it was a breeze. And, you know, so she put him at ease. So had she not done that, I think he would have been like on edge the whole time. So thankfully we did a good job with the, you know, the other one. But I remember I was on Elm Street 2 and we had our actor under the alginate. I think we're doing him from the waist up. And we got him covered and we're starting to do the bandages and stuff. And then one of our assistants is like, just starts talking about how much he hates having a life cast. He goes, I don't see how you can stand this. He goes, I could never, you know, and we're like, but we're not saying anything because we don't want to, you know, so we're just like, you know, so yeah, you know, it's just like picking your moments and, you know, but I guess where I was going with that is that, yeah, I think definitely my people skills did improve, but then I think, and again, you just picking the moments. I mean, obviously if it's Steven Spielberg or Mr. Important Director, I'm not going to sit there and mouth off to him, you know, but if it's, you know, if I'm comfortable enough with my actor, which I certainly was with Chickless by the time we did the second Fantastic Four, that we had a nice, you know, we could tease each other. I remember like on Hellboy 2, we were doing like 90, 100-hour weeks, something like that. And I think they were either 5 or 6 day weeks. I don't remember which. I remember I worked 2,000 hours in 6 months, which is basically the equivalent of doing a 40-hour-a-week job for a year. There was one 3-day period on Hellboy 2 where I got 8 hours sleep total over the 3 days. I got 2 hours one night, 4 hours the next, and then 2 hours the night after that. Thankfully, I was doing Luke Goss, the villain, and he was getting as little sleep as I was, and he started getting concerned that he was going to hurt Ron or hurt himself just from being too tired to function, because they were doing a lot of physical, you know, fight stuff. They had stunt doubles, but he was still doing his share. So at some point, Luke told him, look, I need X number of hours sleep, which translated into me getting more sleep because I would come in maybe a half hour to an hour before him. But also we have things with union shows like turnaround situations. The actors are supposed to get a 12-hour turnaround. The makeup artists, we either get 8 or 10 hours depending on if it's a location shoot or or in town. So there are rules designed to help you not be worked to death, because there was some guy, unfortunately, several years ago now, that was driving home from doing ridiculous hours that did, like, had a car wreck or something. And so then they got a lot more strict about enforcing these, you know, turnarounds and trying to make it a little saner.
That begs the question, how do you take care of yourself under such extreme expectations?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, thankfully, like, they do give you fairly decent turnarounds, like an 8-hour turnaround. When you're on location, you get paid. Your day starts when you leave the hotel and it ends when you get back to the hotel. So if you have 8 hours, then, I mean, you still have to, you know, bathe and eat and whatever. So you might end up getting 6 hours sleep. So, I mean, you kind of get used to it. Thankfully, rarely is it like in the Hellboy situation where it's like 6 months of that. It's, you know, it's like a day or two or a week of it, and then usually things calm down. So, yeah. But you do what you can. I mean, a lot of guys will nap, you know, during lunch. You know, I haven't been back on a set since all this COVID business, so I don't know what the hell to expect then, but it's certainly, just from the friends that I've talked with or listened to some webinars, that's a whole different world. I mean, sometimes they're not even letting makeup artists on set, which I think for a straight makeup show, not to belittle straight makeup, but, you know, once you've kind of powdered, you know, somebody, sometimes there's not a lot of maintenance on them. Whereas I've been on prosthetic makeups where literally between every take, I'm in there re-gluing something. So I don't know that it's going to be practical for them to ban the prosthetic people from, you know, being on set especially if you're doing a featured prosthetic character. I mean, if they're background, it's kind of like, their deep background, who cares? But so that's gonna, be an interesting thing to figure out the dynamics of that. And
You
then
probably haven't had this much time to yourself in decades.
well, it's like a lot of this is kind of like being on location. Like I'd be in Atlanta or something, and you kind of hang out with the locals as much as you can, but there would be plenty of times when I would end up just being alone, in my hotel room all day, or going out to dinner by myself or whatever. And so this is kind of reminiscent of that, only I've got my wife and my son, here.
So let's go back, if we could, to your early years.
I'll go way back. So I met Rick Baker in 1977 at a convention in Houston. In 78, 79, and 80, I would come out to LA for a week, like a vacation, like around Halloween time, and visit with Rick and Tom Berman and Jim Danforth and David Allen and whoever. And again, back then you could just call up. Like I remember calling the Berman shop and just like, hey, I'm going to be in town this week. Mind if I come by? Sure, come on by. Here's our address. So during, I think, the 78 trip, I had met Rob Bottin because he had worked for Rick, previously. So, when Rick's like, who else do you want to meet? I go, well, love to meet Rob. So he gave me Rob's number. I went out and met him. So this is, again, 1978. So now, 8 years later, they're doing Robocop in Dallas. I knew it was going to Dallas. I'd called and talked to the producers a little bit, but they were like, well, we got Rob Bottin doing our stuff. And I'm like, oh, well, that's great. I can't wait to see it. So I just figured Robocop was, no chance of getting on it. And literally it was midnight on a Saturday night. I think I just finished watching Saturday Night Live, and the phone rings and I'm like, who the hell's calling me at midnight? And it was Rob in Dallas, and they needed, I think they had to replace Margaret Prentice was on their crew. She did The Fly with Chris Walas, and she painted everything for Rob on The Thing and Legend and all this stuff. But she had gone up for the first week and did all the ER stuff with Peter Weller, where he's all shot up and they're, trying to save him on the, in the ER. But for what, I don't know if it was a scheduling conflict or specifically why, but she was leaving after that. So Rob wanted to get another person up there to help Stefan Dupuis, wrangle the Robocop stuff. So he knew, because I had met him 8 years earlier, he knew I was in Texas. I guess he still had my phone number, or I don't know how the hell he, maybe he called information. But anyway, but he knew, I know Bart, he's in Houston, so he called me. I flew up to Dallas Sunday and started on Monday, so had I not made that connection with Rob 8 years earlier, through Rick, he wouldn't have known I existed, So anyway, so I was on that for whatever, the run of the shoot. I missed just the first week. So we did a couple of months in Dallas. We did a couple of months in Pittsburgh. And then this was towards the end of 86, in the beginning of 87, they had shot everything but Peter Weller getting killed. The actual Clarence and the gang, blowing him apart. So I guess the producer was running out of money, and he knew that Orion, he knew they needed that. So if he left location without that having been filmed, there was no way they couldn't give him extra money to shoot that. If it's something else, they could say, oh, we don't need the scene of this or that, but they needed him getting killed. So when they mounted the production to do a week or so of reshoots or additional photography in LA, I came out to work on that. And then shortly after that, I'd quit my regular job in Houston by that point anyway. So it was like a sink or swim moment. It's like, well, if I'm going to move to LA, now's the time to do it, because I'm not going to have a better, calling card than having worked on Robocop. So even though it didn't come out till maybe 6 months after I moved to Los Angeles, I still, had pictures of Robo in my book. There was, during these reshoots, Stefan couldn't make it. So we had one day where I got to do the prosthetic face by myself, which was a nerve-wracking you know, experience, but there's at least 3 shots in the movie where it's like, oh, I did him that day. You know, that's all mine. That's all mine. In fact, there was when we were getting ready to do it, I'm talking to Botine's shop, and I can't remember the name of this fella, but they were like, do you need any help, you know, with the makeup? You know, because we know you and Stefan used to do it together, and Stefan's not going to be there. And I said, well, I know I can glue it on. And I go, usually Stefan and I glued it on and based it out. And then while Stefan finished the coloring, the actual makeup on the face, then I was gluing the neck and the back of the head on. So I was like, oh, you know, I've I have spoken to Stefan. I know the steps, but I go, you know, I'm a little hesitant about painting it by myself. So I said, you know, the guy who painted your dummy of Peter, you know, I go, maybe if he could come along and just jump in and help with the painting, you know, if I needed some help at that point. So they're like, okay. So this guy comes, he sits there and watches me for however many hours it took me to glue the thing on and get it all up to the point of doing that. And I go, well, now's the time, you know, if you wouldn't mind jumping in and giving me a hand now, and this is when I could use it. And the guy literally says, oh no. And he gets up and walks out of the room. And I'm like, what the hell are you here for? You know, what were you sitting there watching me? And I mean, and I finished it and it turned out fine. So actually, in hindsight, I'm grateful that he did. But it's like, I didn't need you to just sit there and watch me. You know, I needed you to possibly help at this point in the makeup. And you did.
What did he say?
He literally just said, oh no. And he got up and walked out. That's all he said.
And that was it. And there was no follow-up or anything, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I saw him around, but by that point I was done and we were on set.
What did Peter Weller say?
You know, I don't really remember. You know, I was just like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm doing it, and just did it. And, you know, I don't know, maybe because I had, you know, up to that point, it looked fine, you know, so I guess he was comfortable that he might have given me some encouraging, oh, you know, you can, you know, and, but literally just, oh, hands in the air, you know, oh no, and just, you know, out of there. I was like, okay.
That's hysterical.
Like within 2 weeks of me moving to LA, I was working for Rick Baker during the day on Gorillas in the Mist. And I was working at the Kyoto Brothers at night on Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And then Fantasy 2 started, you know, with the Fright Night and It and stuff like that. So I think I was finding enough work just within the circle of people that I knew. Like I never worked for Stan Winston. I never worked for ADI to speak of. I mean, I might have done I think I was on Constantine for 2 days for Stan, or I did a week for ADI on, you know, Dragon Ball or something. I mean, later I did Bright, which was an ADI show. So, I mean, ultimately I did, but for the first probably 10 or so years, it was, you know, either my own shows. I was working at Fantasy 2. I was working for Rick Baker, Kyoto Brothers, or Steve Johnson. And I just had this small, and who all happened to be like the Kyoto Brothers were a block away from Fantasy 2, and Rick Baker was maybe a mile down the street. So they all kind of were clustered in this one Burbank, you know, ish area. When I did work on The Grinch for Rick, I was on that for 6 months. And that was 2.2 miles from my house. So that was like the best commute, you know, I ever had. I mean, it took me longer driving around the parking garage looking for a place to park than it took me to drive to work, you know. But that happens rarely. So you can't really, there's so many studios spread out in so many places that it doesn't really make sense to like, well, I'm going to live over here because I'll be near whatever. And it's like, because chances are you're not going to work for them. You know, Paramount at least was Hollywood. So that was fairly close.
It was pretty integral for you to get into the union, right?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I joined the union, and I qualified in 93 and I joined in 94, but I'd been living out here since 87. I mean, Fright Night was non-union, even though, you know, I was on the set, which maybe they just tended to turn more of a blind eye back then. But I mean, we shot in Vancouver, so I didn't have to be in the union. And all the shop work is non-union anyway. I think they're trying to, every once in a while, they try to change that. But at some point, I remember I was bidding on the first Wayne's World movie. The first time not being in the union became an issue was, I guess, I never saw it, but I guess the end, they got like a Scooby-Doo ending where a guy pulls a mask off and it's somebody else. So they were looking for a shop to build the mask that he pulls off and then also go on set to apply it. And then me not being in the union was their issue with not using me, because I'd worked with the same director previously. This was when I was at the Kyoto Brothers, and Penelope Spheres, we'd done a TV movie with her, and then she recommended us, she wanted to use us for this Scooby-Doo effect, but the guys were like, "Oh, you're not in the union, we can't use you." And I go, "Well, I'm going to hire a union makeup artist to apply it," because like I knew, again, Margaret Prentice, and then this guy Greg Nelson, who worked with Rick Baker on Coming to America, and he used to do Ronald McDonald. So I'd called up Rick and gotten a couple of union names. So I go, "Well, we're going to build it, but our union guy's we're going to hire this guy to apply it." But for some reason that wasn't good enough for them, which that's what most of the shops do. Most 99% of the shops are, like when I would work for Rick Baker on The Grinch or Men in Black, most of the people in the shop are non-union. Some of the makeup artists also have lab skills, so they would like do the lab phase and then they would go to set. And because they were in the union, we could allow that. But so initially it wasn't an issue. But in '93, I was doing a movie, Double Dragon, for the Kyoto Brothers. And back then there are a number of different ways to get in the union, but basically it's the old catch-22. You have to get hours on a union show to join the union, but you can't work on a union show unless you're in the union. And it's like, well, how the hell is that supposed to happen? But once in a while they have what they call a show will flip, where it will start off as a non-union show, it'll get picketed, and then it will become a union show. And by them flipping, the people that are working on the show, they have to allow them to join the union if they qualify. So the show Double Dragon, we started in was it Chicago? Cleveland, I'm sorry. We started in Cleveland for half the show, then we came to LA for the remainder of the show. And so when we came to LA, they were picketed and it flipped to a union deal. And by the end of the show, I'd gotten, I think you needed 30 days to join, and I'd gotten 31. So I just sneaked in under the wire. Otherwise, I don't know how I would have gotten those extra days. I think the other thing you do now is that I'm not even sure. That's anytime anybody asks, I just say, call the union and ask them. But you have to work like 60 days for 3 consecutive years, I think, on non-union shows and save your paperwork and get letters from the producers. And it's this big convoluted, bookkeeping nightmare. So I do tell any non-union people that want to get in the union, I said, call the union and find out what documentation you need to join. And then as you work these 3 years building this up, get it documented as you go. 3 years from now, don't start calling people you worked for 3 years later, before, saying, "Hey, remember I worked for you for a couple of weeks on," it's like as you go, save your call sheets, save your pay stubs, get letters at the end of the show from the producers saying, so-and-so did. So anyway, but it did behoove me to be in the union, because then I could do more set work, which pretty much since 2000 is pretty much all I've been doing for just whatever reasons. I started doing lab work for other people. Then I started supervising shows for like Fantasy 2 and the Kyoto Brothers. I was their shop foreman for a couple of years. I was Rick Baker's shop foreman on Gremlins 2 for 18 months. So I kind of transitioned from being like a hands-on lab guy to more of a scheduling, coordinating supervisor guy. And then that kind of transitioned into set work. And probably like on The Grinch, I was doing, I worked in the shop for 6 months, and then I went on set doing the stunt double Grinch for 6 months. And then at some point, actually, I think it was because of the insurance. My insurance is tied to my union work. You have to work, now it's 400 hours every 6 months to keep your insurance up. My son was little then and was on our insurance, so I needed to make sure he had coverage. So I started seeking out more set work than I did shop work to make sure that that I had him covered for his union benefits. And then 20 years later, I'm still just doing, now I haven't done lab work and I don't know when. I haven't sculpted anything. I think the last thing I sculpted, I was on Norbit and I was sculpting my son's Halloween makeup for that year. I do remember I was on Men in Black 3 and the friend of mine, Bill Sturgeon, was Rick's shop foreman on that, and I was there doing makeup tests, and I got to do Boris the Animal. I did his application for Rick, so that was like a fan, dream come true. Finally getting to do a Rick Baker, featured character. I did Jim Carrey for 5 days on The Grinch, but that didn't really count. And a friend of mine, Kazu, was doing him, and he needed a little break from Jim, so I stepped in until they could talk Kazu into coming back. But while I was on Men in Black 3, this friend of mine, Bill, was like, hey, everybody's sculpting alien heads. Do you want to sculpt one? And I was tempted to, but by that point, I really hadn't sculpted anything in at least 10, maybe 12 years. I mean, I don't count my son's Halloween makeup. So I think the last thing prior to that was I worked on that Wes Anderson, Rushmore, his second movie. There was a guy with a deformed ear. I did that makeup, and I sculpted that prosthetic. So literally that was the last thing I'd sculpted, and that was in 1998. So Rick Baker's got literally, besides him being an amazing sculptor, he's hired the best sculptors in the business who are working on this show. So I was like, there's no way I'm going to attempt something after not having done it for so long and then have it being compared to, to the best in the business, which that was, again, like with Fright Night 2, when I was having, my stuff had to be on screen next to Greg Canham's, who Greg Canham was a legend even then. He did on Lost Boys and God knows what else. I think this was before Coppola's Dracula, but anyway, but it was intimidating I knew the work that was coming out of my group had to be of a quality level on par with what Greg was doing. So that certainly raised the bar for me personally and made me try, my damnedest to make sure. And I, if I may say so, I think we succeeded, but if you don't know any better, it's not like, obviously somebody else did that, it looks like it all belongs in the same movie, so anyway.
Yeah, it was, Men in Black 3, everything was gorgeous in that.
Oh, yeah,
just
beautiful.
Gorgeous. And Boris the Animal, Jermaine Clement under that makeup and the makeup on top of him, it was stellar. It was great stuff.
Great. He's a great guy. We still, email each other once in a while. I almost worked on the pilot for What We Do in the Shadows. In fact, I'll take credit for Doug Jones' casting as the Baron in that, because he was talking to me about doing the Baron's makeup. And I was asking him, who they were going to, cast for it. And they didn't know. And so I'd suggested Doug, because I'd met him on, the Hellboy movies. But Doug was on Star Trek Discovery then. And, so Jermaine was like, well, isn't he busy on Star Trek? And I go, well, I think they're on hiatus, but, it's not going to hurt to ask, So he's like, I guess it won't. And then, next thing I knew, they did have Doug, but unfortunately I had a scheduling conflict I was doing this movie Peppermint, this Jennifer Garner action film, which I have no regrets doing, but the timing just wasn't going to work out to where I could, like, the days that Doug would have to work in the makeup were like some of our busiest days on Peppermint. So I couldn't, I'd already taken time out from Peppermint to do Paul Bettany on Infinity War for some reshoots that happened during the shooting of Peppermint, which my department had on Peppermint. She's Scarlett Johansson's personal as well as Jennifer Garner's personal. So going into Peppermint, she warned them that, I'm going to have to leave at some point for some Scarlett reshoots. And I said, well, with that in mind, I don't think there's any Paul Bettany, because at the time he wasn't supposed to work, but then they added a couple of, I think I did 2 trips, in the middle of Peppermint, because they kept adding stuff with him. So anyway, but so sadly, I was not able to work on What We Do in the Shadows, and it's such a great show. And that's one of those that, that I would have loved to have done virtually for free, just because it's such a good, I mean, I love Jermaine. I got to meet Taika Waititi. Rick and I went by the set just to visit while they were shooting the pilot. They shot the pilot in LA. They do the rest in Toronto. But so, yeah, that's one of my recent regrets on something that I almost worked on that timing just didn't permit, but usually I don't mind, because you're like, I didn't get to do that, but I got to do this. But that would have been cool. And my wife loves this show. So, and it's rare that things I work on that her and my son really care for. So, that would have been a nice thing to have been.
Yeah. Well, it's a very clever show. It's very well written, well done. But hey, let me ask you about that season of being more of a supervisor. How did you enjoy that time before you actually got into the set work?
It was good. I mean, I don't regret doing it. But I mean, there's probably moments when I would miss, getting to do hands-on stuff. But again, like say on the Gremlins 2, that was like a year and a half. So, I mean, it was great that I had a job for a year and a half, but also I was still involved with problem solving. There's a couple of shots in the movie that I guess, for lack of a better word, I designed. It was like, well, we want this effect. How are we going to do that? I go, well, how about if we do this? And I do remember we were doing with the vegetable gremlin where his ears turn into leaves. This, guy who was assigned that, he was sitting there, trying to figure out how he was going to do it. And then I kind of came by and he goes, oh, Bart, he goes, I think I got the ear transformation worked out. And then I just said, well, are you going to do blah, blah, blah? And he's like, yeah. So like just off the top of my head, I was like, kind of, and he's like, how did you know? I go, well, how else would you do it? He's like, oh. So, I mean, so there were, even though I wasn't actually getting to, I can't say like, oh, the Mohawk gremlin is mine or the whatever gremlin, but there were a lot of technical stuff that I was involved with, working out, like just the way we would mold stuff so that, it's like, we have this, we have to get this out of it, but if we mold it this way, that'll permit us to do that. Or, just thinking things through, that I was involved with a lot of that. So there's a lot of problem solving. I had my own format for doing script breakdowns, which I was amazed that there wasn't like a standard way to do that. In fact, I don't even remember with Mark Shostrom if we had a script breakdown for our, like Nightmare on Elm Street 2. I think we just had a list of like, oh, we're doing this, 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 and this. And even like with that, I did the storyboards with Mark for the sequence and then we just built off my boards, I think was essentially my breakdown. But I had developed a format that I showed the people at Rick's, and I remember, and then they adapted it. And I've seen it used in a lot of other situations now, that as near as I can tell, it's like, well, that's the way I showed people to do it back in 1987. So,
that's cool.
So and I'm not saying that other people wouldn't have come up with that anyway,
Yeah.
but I do remember when we had our first breakdown on on Gremlins, Rick's like, I've never had like this comprehensive of a breakdown. And I'm like, well, thanks.
Well, you sure needed it for that movie. Oh, my goodness.
Oh yeah. There was no way we couldn't. I mean, we made probably 500 or 600 puppets on that show. And yeah, and it was, we made multiples of, I think we had 8 main gremlins that we had, 4 or 5 variations at least of each puppet. Gizmo, we had probably a dozen or more gizmos. And I do remember there was like one situation, the first gremlin that was going to work on set was, I think it was going to be the Daffy gremlin. And then like about a week before it was time to shoot that, they rewrote the scene and they decided they wanted it to be a generic gremlin. So then I had to go through the shop, and we had like 75 people working, and I had to go around and go, okay, you need to stop. Don't make that Daffy. You got to make it this, we need to put this head on this guy. It can't be. And a lot of the stuff was modular enough that we could do that. But and again, I remember some people like, oh, but I'm almost finished with this. It's like, I don't care. It's like, that doesn't work for 3 months now. This works next week. Put that down. Do this, I didn't realize who had the "Just Do It." Was that Nike?
Nike.
Which I didn't realize that was their slogan, but that became my slogan, which that might have been, I don't know, I guess it was at the same time, but I remember just, we had like a chalkboard. I think I wrote on it, "Just do it." Cause I was like, I'm tired of explaining why I need you to do this. I don't have time. Just do it. It's like, this needs to be done first. And it's like, I can't explain that to 75 people. Just, take my word for it.
So would you say that you're a systems guy? This is something that has come to my attention over the last year or two, that systems are better than goals. So a goal, like I'm going to lose 50 pounds, and then people usually run out of steam, right? It's like, I've tried all this stuff, but a system is I'd like to lose 50 pounds, but what I'm going to do every day is I'm going to eat these cucumbers and this kind of food at lunch. I'm going to do this. And you stick to it. It sounds like you have some of that in you as far as planning goes.
I think, at least initially, back when I needed those skills, yes. I mean, again, I haven't really supervised or coordinated shows in a while, although like Peppermint, I was the department head for the makeup effects. So then I did have to reach in the back of my mind, now, how did I used to do this? And, I was very organized. I had like a notebook, like with each day, this is what happens. Oh, I have nothing working this day. I have this effect working this day. Then I could go like, okay, I need to call so-and-so and make sure these, prosthetics are ready, or that I need to hire extra people because it's too much for me, whatever. So I did have it all laid out, both on calendars and in notebooks and stuff, so I could look at it and plan and make sure my ass was covered. Cause I didn't want to, I hate people just pulling shit at the last minute, like, hey, although sometimes that can be fun too. I worked with Wayne Toth he does all the Rob Zombie movies. And when we did Halloween 2, I think daily Rob would just, have us pull something out of our butt. And it was fun because you're like, okay, I got this stuff. Rob wants this. We've got this stuff. How can we accomplish it? And then again, that's working by the seat of your pants, or on your feet, thinking outside the box kind of stuff. So that can be fun. That not necessarily all the time. I did enjoy the nice things about, like, say, doing The Thing on the Fantastic Four, or like when I was doing the Hellboy double. Essentially, it was the same makeup every day. So to some degree, I don't want to sound lazy, but I don't want to say I didn't have to think about it, because you still have to know what you're doing. But I knew what I was doing for the next 6 months. So if that's the parameters of the show going into it, then I like for it to stick to that. If it's a show like the Halloween 2, where Wayne did warn me that every day it's going to be something different, and there's going to be a lot of, then it's like, okay, I got my head wrapped around that. So I think it's as what my expectations are, and then I want it to play out as closely to what I've laid out in my mind. When I took over the Luke Goss character on Hellboy 2, the other makeup artist did him for a couple of days, then quit for whatever reason. So when I took over the character, I look at the schedule and I see, okay, he's going to work 27 days. And then I ended up doing him 53 times. So that's like virtually twice as much. So that drove me nuts, because every time I thought I was at the end of the road, then they would add another 10 or 20 days onto the schedule. And then we were in Budapest and our lab was in Burbank. So, I'm on the phone, okay, we need another 20 set of, Luke Goss pieces, but also he had, I think, up to 5 stunt doubles working. So for every day they added, we needed 5 or 6 more prosthetics. So, we've added 5 days. Okay, well, I need 30 more, Luke faces. And you can't just turn those out in minutes. Those take, those were foam latex. So it takes a minimum, I think, of 8 hours to turn one around, so just these arbitrary changes like that would just drive me nuts. So, I mean, but if that's what I've signed up for, then I'm like, okay, hey, that's the show. That's the.
I mean, it's an important skill to have, because we're being creative in the work that we do, but it's work. It's like, you've got to get stuff done on other people's schedules, and and it needs to be efficient and organized and not chaos. Even if you're dealing with somebody who, like, it sounds like Rob Zombie is I mean, chaos, I don't think that's a good word. Rob Zombie
Creative.
creative in the moment, and he's steering the ship, so that's the way it's going to be, and you know what you're in for, so you just got to go with that. So that's, I mean, that's all really good. I'd like to hear about, you know, your journey in the MCU. You know, that's being a comic book guy, being I would say a highly sought after makeup artist, obviously, in the industry. I mean, you know, I'm going to be dramatic when I say this, and you'll know what I mean when I say it. You're a man of 1,000 faces.
Oh, cool. Thank
I
you,
mean, that's pretty cool, right?
You'll make me blush. I'll turn vision red here in a minute. Well, certainly, yeah. I mean, which I guess I'm kind of lucky that where the Marvel movies have come in my career, because I mean, I'll be frank, I'm turning 62 next week, and I don't plan on doing this forever. I mean, I'm sure I got a number of years left, but, you know, obviously it's got to come to an end sometime. So kind of like Men in Black 3 satisfied a fan desire. You know, I was working for Rick Baker. I was doing a Rick Baker character, the main character on a Rick Baker movie. So yeah, getting to work on these comic book movies in general. I mean, I was a huge Hellboy fan, so that, you know, I loved working on those, you know, working on the Michael Chiklis Fantastic Fours, even though they weren't MCU movies, it was a Fantastic Four was always my favorite book, you know, when Jack Kirby did it. So getting to do his, you know, one of his creations. So yeah, likewise, getting to work on these Marvel movies is just, you know, both artistically and then as a fan, it's just been great. The first one, I did work on the first Iron Man, which, and again, this comes from working for your friends. A friend of mine was on the makeup department. Actually, Deborah, who did Peppermint, she was the department head on Iron Man. But this friend of mine, Jamie Kellman, there was a day coming up that we needed just background. I think it was some of the terrorist guys or whatever. So basically, it was just doing dirt and, you know, blood or whatever. But Jamie's like, he goes, I know Bart's a Marvel Comics fan, and you'd probably like to have a pay stub that says Iron Man on it. I'm like, you bet. So, you know, I was like, who do I put dirt on? You know, what do I need to do? So, you know, that came from, you know, because they knew I was a comic guy. When Spectral Motion hired me to do Michael Chiklis on the first Fantastic Four, I had met Michael Elzaldi on Hellboy 1, and I was on the Rick Baker team doing Hellboy, and then Elzaldi's Spectral Motion did all the Abe Sapien and Samael or whatever, most of the other characters. So when it came time to do the thing, he goes, well, I know Bart's a comic guy. So, you know, he hired me because he knew I would appreciate, you know, that it meant something to me more than just a job. So same thing when John Blake called me to do the Vision on Civil War. You know, he needed a competent makeup artist, but he also knew that I was a fan. And John and I had worked together at Mark Sjostrom's on Elm Street too. So I'd known John since, you know, 1985. So here it's, what is that, 30 years later, you know, he's finally calling me. You know, it's, so yeah, I mean, a lot of times I would get those kind of jobs because people knew, oh, he's, you know, he's good, but he's also a comic book fan. So he's going to appreciate doing this, or he's going to have some insights into it that we might not otherwise have. Although, like in the case of the Vision, he'd already been designed on Age of Ultron. So I was just, you know, and John Blake did a great job at, you know, doing the groundwork. So when I landed, he said, here's the stuff you need, here's the way you do it. And I'm like, great, no problem, you know. So, but yeah, but it's been great both as a fan and as a makeup artist. So I've gotten to work on both the Guardians of the Galaxy. I did Tilda Swinton on Endgame, which again was John Blake, you know, pulling me in for, you know, a couple of days. I did Paul on Infinity War and Civil War, you know, as the Vision. I think I did a day on Doctor Strange reshoots. Unfortunately, most of that stuff, it's bad enough they shoot them in Atlanta, but also a lot of them they shoot in London and Australia. So, and there's no way, it's hard enough just getting to go work in another state, much less another country.
That's a different kind of commute.
Well, but it's also, and I don't blame these other countries, but I kind of wish we were a little more protective of our work sometimes. It seems like anybody in the world can come here and work as much as they want. But anytime we want to go, like when I went up to Canada to do the Fantastic Four, we had to match, as they're like, okay, you're bringing up, so many Americans. Well, then you have to hire so many Canadians. Although in the first Fantastic Four, there were 12 of us, and I was the only one from America, from the U.S. So it's like, 12, 12 to 1. That's not really 1 to 1.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was amazed that I was on Infinity War. Blake was able to get me to go to Scotland for that piece of.
That's really cool. Yeah.
That in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
So I was surprised that he was able, but because I had done Paul on Civil War, he was able to make the argument like, well, this guy needs to come. I hired British assistants I couldn't bring the people that had worked with me, in the.
How long was that trip for you then to Edinburgh?
It turned out to be 2 months. The first, Paul was only going to work about a month, but they were going a month ahead of time to do second unit. And normally they would have just hired locals to do the stunt double on second unit and then just bring me in for Paul. But since I hadn't done him for a couple of years and because I wanted another month of work in Scotland, I, suggested to John, I said, I haven't done Paul in a while. If I do the stunt double, it will get me up to speed so that when Paul gets here, I'll know what the hell I'm doing again. So he's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So I got to, I was there for a month doing second unit and then a month doing Paul on main unit. And the first day when main unit landed, they looked at everything second unit had shot and they threw it all out. They said, they either rewrote it or the staging changed to where most of what we had shot second unit wasn't usable. So
that's amazing.
Like, whatever.
Amazing.
Like,
okay.
But it was 2 months in Scotland. My wife, it coincided. My wife's a school teacher, so it coincided with her spring break. So she came over, and she's Scottish originally anyway, from Glasgow. So she came over, and we, I had enough time off because the vision didn't work every day. There was, however many, we had 6 characters or something, and he was only in a piece of it. So they were like, oh, you got 3 days off. All right, we're going to Loch Ness, or whatever. So, it timed out great in that respect. And just Edinburgh was amazing. So
yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
Thank you, John Blake.
Yeah.
But again, just the Marvel movies have been great. Hopefully I can work on a few more before all is said and done. If they ever, like Captain Marvel, we shot here in LA, so they hired a lot of locals. Endgame was the last thing I went to Atlanta for Marvel wise, and that's been a year or two now. So,
well, I'd like to see some more of your Ravager makeup. So I thought that those were fun makeups.
Oh, cool. Those were fun. Actually, on Endgame, I did Tilda Swinton for 2 days, and then John needed me for Tilda, and then he needed me for Sean Gunn.
Yeah.
But there was a 3-day gap where he didn't have anything for me. So Legacy was there, so they put me on Ravager. So I did 3 Ravagers those 3 days. So
that's cool.
And that was just a case of me being available. So,
So I want to, before we kind of do the, any advice for people listening, want to do something like this as a career, I don't want to short shrift Pennywise. Do you want to share any insight into working on that classic TV miniseries show with Tim Curry as the titular title character in it?
Pennywise, he was it. Well, let's see. It's just at the time I didn't realize he was going to have the longevity that he's had. In fact, I mean, all this T-shirts, and I've got, bobbleheads, and there's all kinds of swag and whatnot associated with him now, which I guess is related to the movie being remade. That I wish all this stuff had come out back in the 90s. It's like I was talking with Rick Baker once, and I was like, it's nice to have one, that I can point at. And I mean, I've worked in Mexico or Europe, and people have been like, oh, Pennywise, and, recognize the character if I'm showing them like my book or something. From that aspect, it's great. I mean, certainly at the time I don't want to say it was just another job. I mean, it was a Stephen King miniseries. So, I mean, there was some excitement there and getting to work with Tim Curry, who, for Legend and, stuff like that. I mean, I was certainly jazzed about. What to say in such a brief time? I mean, it was a fun makeup. He was a great guy to work with. We shot that in Canada, so I had a Canadian assistant, Joanne Smith, that helped me up there. I mean, that was probably the first time I was like starstruck in terms of the person I'm going to be working on.
Yeah.
It is. I think this is a good example of the collaborative nature of this business. I mean, basically, I'm a makeup artist, but it's commercial art. I mean, I'm providing a service. I'm realizing someone else's vision. So I worked closely with Tommy Lee Wallace, and Tim Curry who was the director. And then Tim Curry also had some input, in terms of not so much the forms, the sculpting, but the patterning and the paint job. Tim had a lot of say on that. But I did a lot of 2D drawings that I would submit to the director, get his feedback. I would refine those. I think he picked 3 that he liked. And then I did what we call clay sketches, which I took a head cast of Tim, and then I roughed them out in clay and painted them, photographed them, presented those to the director. He then chose the one of those 3 that he liked, which was this one, which was also my favorite. It may kind of be hard to tell, but it's kind of a stylized Lon Chaney's Phantom of the Opera. Was in broad strokes what it was based on. That's why the nose is.
Oh, that's very cool. I hadn't caught that before.
It was loosely based on the Lon Chaney Phantom of the Opera. The original sculpture, in addition to the head and the nose, it also had cheekbones and a chin, which the resemblance was stronger to Chaney's Phantom at that point. We did a makeup test, which just to show how this stuff evolves. The plan was for him to have all those pieces. We did a test on Tim with this look or these pieces, which is just the head and the nose, and we photographed that and filmed it. And then I went back and added the cheeks and the chin and changed the paint up a little. And we did more film tests with that, and then they decided that the cheek and chin wasn't necessary. So even that late in the game, things still evolved a little bit. And then the paint scheme went through a few more, passes to kind of narrow it down. So this is pretty close to what we had done on Tim's. When we did the first test with just the head and the nose, I let Tim dictate what he wanted paint-wise. And then when we added my cheeks and chin, it was closer to what Tommy had approved in my clay sketches. And then we kind of met in the middle, but leaning probably more towards Tim's.
And it sounded like it was just a fun experience for you.
It was great. I had 12 weeks from start to when we finished filming. I was building in Burbank. We shot in Vancouver. So every week I would fly up to Vancouver from Burbank at least once for production meetings. And then after 4 weeks in, we started filming. So then I had to be up there at least once or twice a week or a couple of days a week for filming stuff. So I had a crew back in LA that was finishing. Again, I had a schedule, so I knew that, okay, Tim works first, the werewolf works this day. So I designed and sculpted Tim's makeup, and we got that all locked in and off and working, and then the other pieces fell into place. And I think the only request I made of them schedule-wise was that the spider had to come at the end, because we had 12 weeks to do that from start to finish, including filming. So we trucked it up there probably 10 weeks in, and then spent the 11th week putting it together and finishing it up there, which I had Aaron Sims and Joey Orozco working on that, who are like 2 of the biggest designers. Aaron Sims Creative is like the design person now for any monster. or creature thing you see 9 times out of 10, Aaron's designed it. But they went up with me and finished the spider while I was on set, with Tim. And then our head mold maker, Brent Baker, who's unfortunately since passed away, was inside the spider performing the, in fact, Joey wanted to do it originally, but then he realized he was claustrophobic. So because we took a body mold to sculpt the thing over so the guy would fit inside. So a couple days before we were going to do that, Joey was like, I don't think I can do this. And then so Brent's like, he was a bit of a novice actor, so he's like, I'll do it. So he ended up being
that's cool.
But Tim Curry was a dream to work with. He was just as nice a guy as you would want, to work with. Him and Kelsey Grammer have probably been two, and Jermaine Clement, been some of just really nice guys that I've gotten to work with. The only, I remember Tim wouldn't let us listen to Rocky Horror Picture Show in the trailer. So I had my best of Tim Curry, from, because he had 2 or 3 albums in the late 80s. So he was happy to listen to that. Madonna's Vogue was in vogue then. So one day him and my assistant were, voguing. I think that might even be on the video. There is a documentary coming out from Dead Mouse Productions called Pennywise. It's either the story of it or the making of it. And in addition to interviewing me, I had shot 2 hours of videotape while we were making it, which I wish I documented I wish I'd done it more. I wish I'd documented the makeup. There's only about maybe 30 seconds of us in the trailer working on Tim, but there's a lot of footage from the set. There's like John Ritter, when we were demoing the spider to the cast, like Harry Anderson and John Ritter are looking at it, and Ritter's mugging with it, running up, acting like he's afraid of it. And I gave him the radio, so he's there, playing with the radios at one point, and so there should be some really cool stuff to come out of this documentary that literally hasn't been seen since 1990.
Oh, that's awesome. So as we wrap up, do you have like any parting words of wisdom for anyone who wants to get into a career as a special effects, makeup effects artist, or have their own business as an artist?
Oh yeah, we didn't even cover that. I had my own shop for 4 years, but
oh wow,
another story. Which I've known, once in a while I miss it, but
yeah,
but,
it's
again,
a lot of work.
It is. It's that I don't envy the shop owners these days. I had my shop from 94 to 98, and the turnarounds these days are just so ridiculous on stuff.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, Vincent Van Dyke, used to do Grey's Anatomy. And I remember I was visiting him at his shop one evening at 8 o'clock at night to talk to him about a commercial I was going to do for him a week or so later. And I recognized the thing he was sculpting was the appliance that me and this friend of mine, Tom Flouts, were going to be applying the next morning at like 6 a.m. So he had it sculpted, molded, opened, cleaned out, ran in a piece to us in like 8 hours. It's just insane. And I mean, I guess in that respect, it's a young man's game. But no, definitely it's the old follow your dream. I think I'm a good example. And a lot of the guys I work with, few of them are from LA, but we all started as fans. We didn't necessarily get into this because we wanted to get rich, or which you can't. But we had a passion and a love for it. Both.
But you can certainly make a living.
Oh yes, I think I've done. I can't complain. I've done well. I've not as good as some, better than others. But yeah, it's definitely you can definitely make a living, particularly once you've gotten in the union. I have no idea what the non-union world's like anymore because I've been in that world for the last 20 plus years. But it is possible, yes, to make a living. Unfortunately, the film industry is not centered in LA anymore. It's so fragmented that, these days it seems like you'd be better off living in Atlanta than here, because there seems to be just more stuff, at least more feature films going on there. I mean, there's a lot of TV still in LA, and hopefully enough to keep me employed for the next couple of years until I decide to retire. I mean, not that, I mean, like I'm from Houston. The chances of a local, guy from back there, I think making it, I thought were pretty remote. So I say, if I can do it, anybody can do it. It's just like, it's the old follow your dream. If you want to do makeup effects, certainly now there's books, there's schools, there's a wealth of information that wasn't available, but certainly in any kind of art form or anything, just if you've got a passion about it and you want to do it, just don't let people tell you can't. I've got a younger brother that was into skateboarding, and we were like, what the hell are you wasting your time doing that for? And then he had the biggest skateboard ramp, skate facility, whatever the hell you call it, in the Southwest, when he,
Wow.
and when I worked on the Bad Grandpa, the Jackass movie, all those guys came from the skateboarding community. And I was like, hey, any of you guys ever go to Houston? Did you know a place called Southside? We used to go there all the time. And, I was in Boston once taking a tour of the city, and we're coming past a skate park, and they mentioned my brother's place in Houston as part of their talk about this thing in Boston. So I was like, this guy, he did okay. And I remember at the time when he first wanted to open it up, we were like, what the hell's, what are you thinking? What is this skating crap? So, I mean, if you can find your niche and do it, do it. Recognizing what that is and, how to get there, I think is the trick. I mean, I think I was lucky. Like I said earlier, kind of like the whole who you know thing. I think having contacts and stuff certainly helps. And again, like I think when I met Rick Baker, if I had been a jerk, or an asshole, and he, hadn't taken a shining to me, then who knows where I'd be now? Because he certainly helped, and other friends along the way, like Ernie Freno, that through him I met Mark Shostrom and whatnot. So, but just and again, for me, this started as a hobby and as a fan. So I would be doing this to some degree anyway, even if it didn't end up being my profession. I was a technical illustrator for an oil tool company in Houston before I started doing this full time. So I was still doing something artistic, but that was just a job. This is what I wanted to do. I didn't necessarily know how to do it, but I, figured it out. So yeah, I mean, kind of identifying what you want, what your niche is, and then maybe you have to move there. Which, I mean, the move from Houston to LA was scary, but ultimately it paid off. So yeah, I mean, I certainly can't complain. But yeah, I could have just as easily, it could have failed. I could have turned around and gone back to Texas, a couple of years after coming out here. So yeah, there's certainly a degree of luck involved, but there is a lot of work still these days, even with the digital stuff, which we talked about Jurassic Park earlier, I think, and that certainly cut the legs out of stop motion and did impact makeup effects. But since then, there was still the Grinch and the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes and that Wizard of Oz that came out not long ago, or the Men in Black movies. So there's still been huge makeup shows. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies were gigantic makeup shows. So there's still makeup work. I mean, American Horror Story, fortunately they're still doing, and I think they're still going to do that for a while, because even though they can do cool digital characters like Thanos, not every movie's got hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on that. I think that digital Peter Cushing in, was it Rogue One?
Rogue One.
I think that costs like over $6 million. And it's like really, and as far as I know, they didn't even, it's like, well, why don't you try the $200,000 makeup first? And if that doesn't work, then, or augment it. Or like when Chris Evans, the old Chris Evans at the end of Endgame, they had a neck, and they did his eyes, and they did like a bald cap with the wig. Basically the areas that were like where the neck disappeared into the wardrobe, that hard line is hard to do digitally so you don't get it rocking around. So the areas that were going to have to interact with other stuff, they did as a makeup, but then they did the face with CGI. And after they filmed it, Chris Evans, a friend of mine worked on it. And he said when they were taking him out, Chris Evans was like, we should have done the whole thing, as a makeup. And it's like, now you say it, But so there's still definitely a place, for makeup. But it's also, I think, I'm sure the legacy guys had a hand in deciding how much of that they needed to do. Because again, like around the eyes, they wanted to use Chris's eyes, so that's why they did makeup around his eyes, so that the digital stuff, because like you could see like on his jawline, it kind of looks, for lack of a better word, airbrushy, where they kind of fade the digital stuff into the.
And you can kind of see it move here and there as it's trying to catch up. But it looked great.
That one I thought was amazing. I've seen, like, they tried it earlier on Peggy Carter in Civil War, not quite as successful.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that, again, I know I got off on a tangent, but just, I think basically just kind of, if that's what you want, whatever you want to do, whether it's painting or whatever, just, they're just start off by doing it. I got a lot of novices that contact me like, what should I do? And it's like, have you tried to do anything yet? Just try it, And I think there's somebody just recently, I was sending him some links for some books. It's like, there's plenty of good makeup books. There's sources for all this stuff. There's even pre-made, if you just want to be an onset application person like I am now, there you can buy beautiful pre-made prosthetics where you can hone your skills, on applying. So, I mean, it's a lot easier these days just with the schools and the opportunities and whatnot than I think it was back when I was coming up. So,
oh, that's for sure.
No excuse. Just do it. Like Nike said.
That's awesome. So I'm assuming people can find you on Instagram if they want to reach out.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. It's just Bart Mixon. So just look for I think there might be, if there's other Bart Mixons, just look for the one that's got makeup. If you see Pennywise, you're in the right place.
Awesome.
But yeah, I'll get either emails or texts and whatnot, or whatever, direct messages from people, and and I'll help them as much as I can. But a lot of it, it's just it's like, well, you have to have some kind of an interest. Mark Shostrom used to teach at a makeup school here in town, and he said, like, he'd have a class of like maybe 20 people, and there's maybe one or two that were legitimately interested in pursuing that as a career, or and as an art, and most of them were just there wasting their parents' money, and so yeah, it's like, if when people send me stuff like, hey, I've done this, how can I improve, whatever, I mean, at least that shows me that they've got some legitimate interest, as opposed to like, well, I think I might that looks like a fun job, how do I get into that? It's like, well, well, I don't know, do you care? So, at least, show some initiative and some legitimate interest. And because it's hard work. It's a pain in the ass. You're getting up at 2:00 in the morning, and, I mean, there's enough of it that sucks, that if you don't legitimately love it, then you shouldn't be doing it, And fortunately, I still do love it, but, it's the scale. But I remember, like, when I was working on Bright, we were shooting in some real crappy parts of LA, and usually our call times would be during rush hour traffic. So like, I'd leave the house like, hey, I'm going to work, I'm doing a fun makeup, I'm working with my friends, and then I would be in such god awful traffic for an hour and a half that by the time I got to work, I was ready to kill somebody. And it just, it's like, and now I got to sit here and interact with this actor and do this cool makeup. And I was just like on edge. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff about it that's not fun, with the hours and whatnot. But then on the flip side, yeah, I mean, I've been to, Hawaii, Scotland, Prague, Budapest, Australia, they're Atlanta, Cleveland. I mean, there's opportunities for travel and so it can be a fun and rewarding job, but it's hard work. It's not just a cakewalk. You're not just sitting there, powdering a nose and, and then you putting your feet up for, 8 hours. I mean, you're, and not to belittle straight makeup, because they work their asses off too. I mean, they're on those guys maintaining them just like it was a prosthetic makeup sometimes, so, I mean, it's intense work regardless of if it's straight makeup or special makeup, but, but it's rewarding. I love it. I mean, it's been, I was a fan of it since I was probably 10 or 12. And So now I'm turning 62. So it's like 50 years, this is pretty much all I've been, this in comic books. So, and again, like we talked with the Marvel movies, getting to combine the two, that's a dream come true. So yeah,
That's
just,
awesome.
yeah, go for it. Just do it. Don't let anybody tell you can't,
There you go. Thanks, Bart. Thanks so much for being my guest.
Oh,
You
cool.
rock. I'm looking forward to seeing your next makeups. I've been a big fan for a long time, and so it's pretty cool to be able to chat with you.
Thanks again, Bart. You rock. It was really, really cool to hear all about, your career. Really got a good picture through all the stories you shared about how committed you were to your craft, how hard you worked, how you developed relationships. That's a big, big takeaway is you develop relationships with people and then you end up working with your friends because you're A, somebody that is trustworthy, B, somebody that is easy to work with, and C, somebody who is excellent at their art. And, that's something that we need to bear in mind when we start to develop relationships with potential clients, and then the clients start to become longer term clients, and then we become their friends. What does that mean? Like, how does that play into the career of someone? Well, it plays a big role because people want to work with people that they like, that they trust, and who are good at what they do. And, he has a really high level of desire. Like, he worked hard at his craft. And that's probably no surprise, right? Just to see everything that he has done along the way. But I don't hear him saying that he sat around and just thought about a lot of stuff. It sounds like, Bart was in there and he was getting stuff done, and then he was corresponding with people in the industry like Rick Baker and Rob Bottin, and, he was making sure that he was, as best he could, developing those relationships. So I think that is something that we need to bear in mind. We've got to have the desire, we got to work hard at our craft, and then we need to get in contact with people who are in the industry that we want to get into so that we can start to develop relationships with them and find our way in, because that's what you got to do. You got to find your way in. Probably nobody is just waiting for you to come along and they're just going to plug you in and coax you and teach you, right? You have got to take the bull by the horns and really go after it hard. Okay, so I encourage you to go online, and again, you can take a look at Bart's work on Instagram, and his information is in the show notes below. On behalf of the Breakthrough Creative, I'm John, and I encourage you to work hard at your craft, get busy making something, and find a way to make a living with it. We'll see you next time.